morning, everybody. Welcome back to the moment where every week is a year. I can't believe it's still January. But we're here, excitingly, with our friend Wayne Felton, who is a big TikTok creator. I'm sure you've seen his face. He's also, he talks about pop culture. He talks about politics. He writes for The Root. And he happens to live in Minneapolis. And I've been watching him break this down from the inside out. So he's going to help us there today. Meredith, my friend, hello. Hi.
Hello. How are you?
Good. I mean, good. Are we good? How are we answering that question? Wayne, how are you answering that question today?
I'm here. That's my answer every single time. How you doing? We're here.
So We're here. Well, here on the show today, like I said, we're going to be talking about life on the ground in Minneapolis generally and in the aftermath of ICE killing an ICU nurse, Alex Preddy, over the weekend. And it seems like the Trump administration might be trying to pull back. We're going to talk about that. Then my big TikTok creators here, we're going to talk about the ownership fallout now that TikTok is owned by the US, and raise your hand if you made an ICE video that got 0 views on TikTok over the weekend. We're going to talk about the celebrities who are suddenly getting political because they must be listening to the moment. They were all out in Sundance loud and proud, maybe. And then we're going to talk about the upcoming potential government shutdown with civics educator and content creator Ben Sheehan. So here we go. Welcome to the show. If you live under a rock, what you missed this weekend is that we all woke up Saturday morning and opened social media and watched another in the street execution. ICE murdered an ICU nurse. They shot him several times. Then the Trump administration came out and said that he was brandishing a weapon, which became like a weird Second Amendment conversation. It was like the upside down over here, which is why I think things might be changing with their narrative. I just want to play what now former Border Chief Greg Bavino had to say about the killing, because it was pretty cynical. Diana, do we have that clip?
The victim are the Border Patrol agents. The suspect put himself in that situation. The victims are the Border Patrol agents there.
The victims are the Border Patrol agents there. The Atlantic has since reported that he's been removed from his role and is now coming back to California, where he's expected to retire soon. Then also, by the way, I want to throw out there, Pam Bondi sent a letter to Tim Walz demanding SNAP and Medicaid information, that he end sanctuary policies, and that he turn over the voter rolls, which put up all of my spidey senses. I want to talk about Ben with that. But that's sort of generally what we missed. Wayne, give us the real, those are the headlines. Tell us about what life is like there.
Yeah, it's been really weird just for the last several weeks. So I think there was a lot coming into the new year itself. People were really worried about the fact that ICE was here. We hadn't gotten fully into Metro Surge at that point, but we were highly aware of their presence and the impact that they were having on the community. By the time we got into Operation Metro Surge, which came on the other side of Nick Shirley lying about daycares in Minnesota, and just to take it a step back from that, Nick Shirley ended up in Minnesota because I think it's Christina DeMuth, and I might be messing up her first name, but last name is DeMuth. She's the Speaker of the House for the state of Minnesota. She's running for governor. And what she was attempting to do was to besmirch the character of Tim Walz going into this gubernatorial race. And so she invited Nick Shirley into Minnesota and kind of fed him this story. We've been prosecuting fraud in this state for the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. The governor allocated money specifically to make sure that we had the people to adjudicate the fraud that was happening. But that becomes a national story. Governor Walz steps down. That was a hard day for me. He stepped down from the re-election run, but that was a hard day for me. I think Governor Tim Walz is a really good human. And then Metro Surge happens. And so all of this is happening at the same time. We're in the news for something and everyone's arguing that our neighbor is people who are United States citizens, because Somalis are United States citizens, that they are somehow illegals who need to be kicked out. So that's happening. We get the governor information, the Metro Surge. And so as that's happening, we're having this weird dichotomy where on the one hand, we are all collectively trying to live as normally as possible. But on the other hand, we are living in active occupation zone. Like, I am on several Signal chats, which apparently it was just released. Kash Patel wants to investigate the Signal chats that people are using to track ICE.
Really?
That just dropped this morning, right? But I'm in several Signal chats where people are literally, and just group chats where people are saying, hey, heads up, you live in this town, ICE is there, right? We're communicating on that level. We're actively talking to teachers about, is ICE circling your building? We have families who are carpooling to school to ensure that the kids can still go to school when the parents are afraid to go out, right? I have friends who are teachers there are parents who have emailed and said, if my kid goes home and I'm not home, this is who you should call next, right? And so, like, when we talk about these things on a macro level, everyone wants to make this about, and I know, and I hear the arguments like, there are certain people who shouldn't be here and they should be turned over. This is having such a profound impact on our ability to grocery shop when ICE agents are walking through grocery stores, our ability to go to sporting events, our ability to go to school or to work. There are people who are not going to work. People are calling for the governor to have an eviction moratorium because people aren't going to work because they are afraid. And everywhere I go, because I coach my son's basketball team, and so I just talk to parents between games. And every day, because everybody sees me on social media now, they want to share with me a story of their neighbor or their friend, right? Who it's like, oh, I have a family friend who's here legally, but was sent to a detention center and they bled out their life savings to get them out of the detention center. But now he can't go to his construction job to work because even though he is here legally, he has legal residence, they keep raiding the construction sites. Which is also, and I'm sorry, I'm a high horse at this point, but like you can't simultaneously say,
high horse.
You can't simultaneously say we need to get the price of housing down while tariffing all of the materials that come in that help us build homes and then detaining all the people on the construction sites. And so, to the point about the tide turning, I think that nothing for this administration is working, and this is working the least.
Yeah.
And you have American citizens, myself included, who are terrified about just being outside because, and I keep saying this, they are killing white people. Do you know how bad of a situation we're in when it's white people who are getting killed? Yeah. Once again, I live in Minnesota. So George Floyd, Philando Castile, or Jamar Clark, Dante Wright, we can run the experiences. But when Renee Good was killed, I was like, yo, they killing white women. That's and even then it was like, oh, she's blue-haired wine mom, super liberal. And I was like, okay, cool, sexism's still alive and well. But now all of a sudden everybody's like, we just can't stand for this because it's a white dude.
Yeah. I know. I've heard.
Yeah,
go for it.
I think the two, if someone asked me what are the three biggest things that have happened in the last 10 years, I would say COVID, the murder of George Floyd, and this. And so I'm just, obviously Minnesota was impacted by COVID. All states were impacted by COVID. But why do you think the two biggest things that have happened to this country in the last 10 years have happened in Minneapolis, not in Los Angeles, not in New York City? Why is it Minneapolis?
Yeah. So I think that on the one hand, from a political standpoint, there's this idea of the coastal elites, right? So there's this idea that people who live on the coast are out of touch and, whatever it may be. I think that COVID provided the perfect scenario for George Floyd's murder to have the impact that it had. Mm-hmm. I think that if we weren't inside and using social media at a clip we never had before up until that point, because 2020 changed the game. Suddenly we were bored in the house and we're in the house bored, right? Yeah. And so the fact that we couldn't escape that visual and the virality of people seeing it, I also said at the time, the fact that it wasn't a gun made a huge difference.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Wait, can you
had he been shot, there would have been a lot of conversation about, lethal use of force, and that's what cops do. It was the act of the type of chokehold, the way that it went. And if you watch the video, and I'll admit to this day, I've never watched that video. The last video I watched was Philando Castile bleeding out in his car. And after that, I was like, I'll never do this again.
Yeah.
I just believe the videos exist, right?
Yeah.
But listening to people talk about it, listening to George Floyd cry for minutes on end, I think just wrecked people.
Mhm.
And Minneapolis as a place in particular sits in this weird positionality where we are extremely Midwest. When you think Minnesota, you think, oh, all shucks, right? Like, so we sit in that space where people feel like there's a relatability. Almost all of the major, voices you hear on the news come from Minnesota. We have this universality of the way that we talk and things like that. And we are a very liberal place. We're the only state in the union that did not vote for Reagan, right? Like we had the most progressive legislative slate anywhere in the country in 2022, right? Like we're sitting in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I think that happened and it was the perfect storm in regards to George Floyd. I think now, once again, all of those factors being at play, I think that Trump has said publicly, like he believes he won Minnesota 3 times, right? He hates Tim Walz because I think Tim Walz is the perfect encapsulation. Like he is a gun-owning veteran who is a straight white male who is balding, right? Like everything about his personality should be conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And he is overseeing the most progressive state in the country. And so I think that makes a lot of folks really upset. And I think the president in particular very upset. And so I think that we are the perfect place for the revolution to start because, Prince said, he named his band The Revolution, right? But I think we're the perfect place for the revolution to start because we aren't this coastal elite place. We have these deeply Midwestern family values. And a part of that Midwestern family value is we take care of each other. We look out for each other. We make sure that everybody has what they need. And that's what Minnesotans have been doing. Minnesotans, the mutual aid that has gone out, like I said, the way that people are carpooling and communicating, the way that folks have become legal observers. Like you can't go anywhere in Minneapolis without hearing whistles and drums and seeing people following these agents. I know it is irritating the agents, but we as a state, we are a refugee state, right? The Somalis came as refugees. Before that, it was the Hmong population that came as refugees. This is what we do as a state. And so we are perfectly positioned to be the place that represents the types of values we all talk about while also doing them in a place that is 88% white.
Yeah.
Well, I think that really does, though, bring up a really good point of something that happened over the weekend, because you brought up the fact that like one of the reasons that George Floyd's murder took hold of this nation was because we were home. We were on social media. So over the weekend, I couldn't get on my favorite, in quotation marks, social media app, which is TikTok, because there were these TikTok, I guess they're saying they were just like a data outage or something. But I couldn't get on TikTok. I'm sure either one of you, or I couldn't post on TikTok. Let me say that. I couldn't post on TikTok. Nothing was uploading. And I just felt like, okay, the ownership has now just changed to make it partially and primarily US owned. And now all of a sudden, within hours, I can't post anything. And we know that people use social media to communicate what's happening on the ground. So I guess like my first question to all of you is like, a lot of people are saying, get off TikTok, leave TikTok. Rebecca, are you going to stay on TikTok?
Am I going to stay on TikTok? I don't I'm not going to make a statement about staying on TikTok. I don't have like that big a following on TikTok, to be totally honest. And so like, I feel like I'm not somebody that people are like looking to. I'm like deeply curious. Like, not only is it US based, it's owned by somebody who is a very close ally with Donald Trump. Like, it does feel, I also feel like part of why I might stay on TikTok and stay with me is like, I like to follow, like, I'm on Truth Social, not posting, but like I like to see what Trump says on there. I follow Megyn Kelly and Link Lauren on Instagram. I follow DHS. Like there's things that I like to be in just to like see what's going on outside of my bubble in my life. And so I'm curious to see what happens on TikTok, but I feel like you guys have a much more like relationship.
I'm staying. Yeah. Wait, what about you?
Yeah, I just don't believe in ceding ground in the middle of the chaos,
Okay.
right? I abandoned Facebook in 2020,
Yeah,
and
I
that
did
was
too.
real personal. Like I cannot do this with you all anymore. And then Meta financially incentivized me to come back onto Facebook, right? But I realized in coming back that I left, but in the process of leaving, I left the opportunity to continue to speak to an audience who's primarily there. Like my metrics on Facebook right now are most of the people who watch my videos are between the age of 50 and 75. Which is wild because on TikTok, it's all millennials, right? And so, and the same thing, I feel like a lot of us left X, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, and I understood why we did. Like I did fully understand why we left why we left Twitter, and also in doing so, like we didn't want to make Elon more rich, which I don't think that matters. He's gonna
he's doing fine
but
without
also, it left a vacuum, and so the last thing I want to do is give TikTok to the conservative voices, even if they're going to make it more difficult from an algorithmic standpoint. I want to ensure that people still have access to the information they need. And until we're in the spot, because like I also am actively walking around and speaking in a country that I vehemently disagree with its leadership. And so I can't just always cede ground when I disagree with somebody. I have to be willing to speak truth to power in these spaces.
One question I have for you guys, it's so hard to know now what we're believing. Do you think that the outage, because like we all did it, we all put up a video. I got 0 views on a video I did about, I think it was about Pam Bondi and the voter rolls. Before we move on to the next topic, I'm just curious, like, do you think that TikTok is suppressing? Gavin Newsom is now doing an investigation, or do you believe them that it was a data center issue? And like, I'm just curious, like, do you think they are censoring immediately?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that they're retraining the algorithm that they did tell us
what I think it is.
in the cell. And so I think that there's that element. Anytime you do a big data switch over, you're going to have problems. We've had glitches with TikTok before when it was in former ownership. It was weird, but no one had views. Like no one I know, at least. I posted 3 videos that all sat at 0 views, and I was just like, well, this is cool. And so I think that like there's multiple things that are true. I think that they're trying their best to retrain or put a new algorithm in place. I think that they have admitted that they're going to censor certain things. I think the whole, like, someone tried to send Epstein and it like flagged it. So there's that, which I think is where the investigation with Gavin Newsom is coming from. And I think that like technologically speaking, it is really difficult to take an app that size and just be like, there you go.
Right.
I think all of those things are happening at the same time. And I try to not go too conspiratorial, but I do think that they would prefer if we are not the biggest voices on there. But ultimately, they're going to give the people what they want because that's where the money is.
Well, I guess one thing I just want to say before we bring in our fantastic guest is there's a lot of celebs who all of a sudden have come out of the woodwork to say, maybe Trump 2.0 wasn't a great idea. And so I just want to quickly round table it. Like, has there been any celeb that you guys have been like, oh, this is rich? Because for me, yesterday, it was one comedian, Tim Dillon, who I have always...
Oh, really?
I thought for so long that Tim Dillon, Shane Gillis, and Shane Dawson were the same person.
Yeah.
Which, like, now that I'm really learning who they each are is an insane premise. But I was just like, it's so interesting with Tim Dillon because he platformed so much of this administration. But now I think what's happening is he's probably seeing, because he's not doing anything, he's seeing his numbers dip. And something that I think is really important that people know is that celebrities do social listening, like big PR firms, in a way that like we can't even fathom. They have this like crazy data software. It's not like stupid Google Trends. It's not like somebody scrolling through and getting the vibe. Now they're realizing like, shit, it's going to hit my bottom line. So I have to put out something. And then it's very curated. So is there any celebrity for you that's come out that you're like, oh, here we go?
Rogan.
Yeah.
Like watching Joe Rogan go like, this is a Gestapo, and like, which, yes. And I'm also like, all of these folks, they so created this environment, I think, to your point. And so like, my push on any celebrity who's now saying something is like, cool, utilize that same power, that same platform to get people elected in November who will bring checks and balances to this administration.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, there's nothing that we can do about the fact that you got them elected in 2024. But we can actually have a Congress and a Senate who will ensure that they cannot go outside the lines and the bounds of the executive power. So don't just apologize and say this has gone too far and I was wrong. I was so wrong that I will make sure that we have at least 2 years of checked and balanced power.
Amen. Okay, to that end, this is like a perfect segue because we have somebody here to help these celebrities understand the levers of power and help us understand levers of power. We're joined by Ben Sheehan. He's a creator and the host of Civics Made Easy, a new PBS show. I've seen him everywhere on social media helping me understand how to call senators. He explains the fundamentals of American government. He's also the best-selling author of What Does the Constitution Actually Say? And writes the Substack Politics Made Easy. Ben Sheehan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're so glad to have you here. Let's start with like this week's news and then go into the midterms because I actually have like so many questions. But
Sure.
You've been posting a ton, and so have we. There's a new vote coming up on Friday. And for the first time over the weekend, Chuck Schumer put out a statement saying that Democrats are going to push back on new DHS funding, which felt like, oh, okay, Chuck Schumer might start to have a spine here. This already passed the House, though, last week. Democrats capitulated in the House. 7 Democrats voted with Republicans to continue this DHS funding. Although I've seen some buyer's remorse, which like I saw a Democrat in New York be like, oh, I didn't know that ICE was bad. But okay, I want to take it to this week. Why do you think that Democrats last week voted for this? And do you think that there's a chance that there really will be a government shutdown over this on Friday?
Well, like you said, every Democrat other than those 7 voted against the bill. And I think that there was a fundamental misunderstanding about what the bill was. I think, all the Democrats, the 7 Democrats who voted for it are all in, very moderate districts, very competitive districts that are going to be close races in November. So, I think what happened was leadership did the calculus and they said, well, Republicans have the bill and are going to pass it anyway. And there's been some misinformation spread around that if every Democrat voted yes, that would have, denied the bill. And while it looks like that on paper, there were 4 Republicans who abstained and were there present in the House, but just didn't vote. And so for similar reasons, some Republicans in moderate districts didn't want to vote for it. Some Democrats in moderate districts decided to vote. But the truth is that Republicans had it in the bag. And so what usually happens is that leadership in a party will say, okay, the bill's going to pass anyway. If you need to vote this way to help your reelection prospects, go for it. And that's business as usual in Washington, in Congress. And so they did that. But I really think that they misunderstood the moment because this is so much bigger than just an ordinary vote on a funding bill. This is something that is what has woken people up who never participated in politics before. And that's what I've been seeing on my social media is that I've heard from thousands of people across the country. I just post scripts and tools, basic sort of things that people can run with and do. I don't, if you want to do it, great. If you want to share it, great. If you want to call, great. But I think the videos that we've been seeing, and obviously this most recent murder of Alex Preddy in Minnesota, have really woken people up and gotten them involved in a way that maybe they haven't before. And I've gotten thousands of messages from people who were calling this week just for the first time. And so Tom Suozzi, who put out that statement, clearly is acknowledging that he misread the moment. As to your question about whether this is going to pass the Senate, I do not think it is going to pass the Senate. Remember, it's different in the Senate because Republicans need 7 Democrats or independents to vote with them because you need 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. And so, Chuck Schumer, as you mentioned, has already come out against it. And so I feel pretty confident the bill is going to fail in the Senate. The question is, what is going to then succeed? because it's not just right now the ICE funding that's part of this. It's all of DHS that includes the Coast Guard and FEMA and Border Patrol. It's tied up into funding for health and for the environment and defense and all sorts of things. They put it into one giant package. And so Democrats are trying to separate the bill so that they can pass all the other stuff that's unrelated and then work to make changes so that ICE isn't getting more money and also is going to have, serious changes to how the organization operates.
We have seen some Republicans voting with Democrats in the Senate recently. I think of Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Josh Hawley. Do you think that some of those senators are going to vote with Dems at the end of the week?
I don't know. Susan Collins came out yesterday, I saw, and said that she still supports this bill. Josh Hawley has gone against the administration publicly a handful of times, not a lot, but a handful of times. And you have seen senators speak up, people like Rand Paul, people like John Curtis, who's a new senator in Utah. So my guess is there might be one or two, but, I haven't seen enough people speaking out. They keep calling for a transparent investigation, and obviously that's needed. But they aren't taking the next step and saying that there's something fundamentally wrong with what is happening, how this agency is operating from the top all the way to the bottom. It's not just this latest murder, which was egregious and a violation of like half the rights in the Bill of Rights in one instance. But there's something really, truly wrong with how ICE is operating and going into cities and grabbing people who have been living here for generations, peacefully operating as part of the community. This is totally unlike what we've seen in the past, where Border Patrol may have taken draconian measures, but most of the deportations under Obama and previous presidents have been people at the border who just had crossed over and being detained and then taken back. It's a much different situation to have a federalized law enforcement going into cities and ripping people out of the community, including people with no criminal record, including citizens.
Yeah. That's a really important differentiation, actually. I just made that connection that is like, oh yeah, at the border. I mean, like, it's not for me no matter what, but there is a difference between going into communities and snatching people out. Wayne, by the way, is in Minneapolis. We were just talking to him.
Wow.
Like, he knows what this is like.
Yeah, and having lots of conversations around just that. People will try to say, oh, Obama did it more, or whatever it might be. Now, the pettiness in me says, oh, so what you're saying is that it's possible to do more with less funding and less chaos. And so that just means that Obama was a better president. But outside of that, I think, like I said earlier, every day I'm hearing stories of people who have legal protected status, who are here legally, who have a green card, who are being told that no longer matters. We got rid of that when Trump became president, which is like not at all in any way, shape, or form true. And I think to that point, there's a lot of conversation, at least that I've had with local politicians, around what can be done. And something that I know both the governor have said and a lot of local politicians is the people who can stop this are Republicans in Congress. And so, like, oh no, what just happened? Am I still here?
You're here.
Okay.
Live, baby.
My computer just stopped.
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. As we're, and I say that to like, as we're approaching these different votes, I think it's so important to recognize that, like, we oftentimes want to call Democratic congressmen, my goodness, call your Republican reps and push against this, because I think so often it's like they're a lost cause. They very clearly are not.
You would be surprised how few people actually pick up the phone and call their representatives in normal times, in normal moments. It doesn't take a lot of phone calls to flag an issue to the top of a member of Congress's radar. I once heard that if someone gets 25 calls in a single day about a specific issue, that's sort of like, oh, wow, this is really resonating with people.
Oh, interesting.
And now it's people are getting way more calls. So calls really do move the needle. One of my pet peeves is when people say politicians don't care. It doesn't matter if you engage. It doesn't matter if you call. Politicians want to get reelected. Members of Congress want to get reelected. The entire House is on the ballot this year, a third of the Senate. So this is a year, and primaries start in a few weeks. March 3rd is the first set of primaries in Texas, in Mississippi, and in North Carolina. So people are pretty quickly going to have their names on the ballot. And in a moment like this, they're definitely doing the mental math and figuring out, how do I get reelected? And it's really important for people to call their own members, so your own 2 senators and your specific representative in the House, because if you're a constituent, then you're a potential voter and you're somebody who could give them another term or throw them out of office. And so calls do work. I posted about this yesterday on social media, but we're seeing, a massive sea change in the last 3-4 days that I've never seen before. I've never seen moderate politicians come out 2 days after their vote, 3 days after their vote, and apologize.
Yeah.
I've never seen this many people going, throwing members of DHS under the bus, questioning leadership. And, we're just seeing a massive amount of pushback. The Democrats pretty quickly whipped the vote. Whipping the vote just means that making sure every Democrat in the Senate is going to vote against this bill. And that's not something that happened in the House vote on Thursday. Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the House of Democrats in the House, said, we're not going to whip the vote. You're free to vote however you want. And that's why those 7 Democrats did that. But we're seeing a massive sea change in just a handful of days that is rarely, if ever, seen in Washington. And that is 100% driven because of what we're seeing in Minneapolis, people standing up and protesting, and then people who are not in Minneapolis around the country taking to the phones and calling their representatives. And we're seeing a massive shift.
To that point, the fact that Greg Abbott, of all people, got out and said, ICE needs to reevaluate what they're doing.
Governor of Texas.
Greg Abbott wanted every bit of this and was willing earlier in the year to send Texas National Guard to other parts of the country to support ICE agents. And so I think, Ben, to your point, there has been such a quick, and we have to maintain this momentum and ensure that we're continuing to have these conversations, that we're continuing to talk not only on the local level, but we're having these conversations with politicians, because this will be on the ballot in November and in these primaries coming up.
Can we talk about them? This is such a good turning point to talk about the midterm elections. This is my pet obsession is, there's been talk, Trump has joked about canceling the midterms. He has told Republicans that he thinks he's going to be impeached. We know that he can't affect elections at the federal level. This is happening at the state level. But this weekend, when Pam Bondi sent a letter to Tim Walz asking for the voter rolls, my hackles have just gone up here. And so my question to you, Ben, is how do we safeguard elections at a state level now? And how do we show up in a way that they can't undermine the elections? Or am I too dark here? Have I gone to the dark place?
One thing I want to just call out though, Rebecca, is I want you to tell people what voter rolls are, because I didn't know what those were. And I think that's really important. It's not a term that we hear thrown around all the time.
It's just the voter data. It's the state has all of this information. I'm registered to vote. It says my name. It says my date of birth. It says where I live. It says how I vote, as in my party. I think it says when I voted. I'm saying,
is it public information? Is this the stuff that you can look up? Or is this privilege?
It's half public. So campaigns and certain organizations that are involved with campaigns and elections can get access to voter data, but it's not just open to anybody. You can in many states see if somebody did or didn't vote. It doesn't tell you, beyond that where they live, their zip code, their party preference, stuff like that. But voter rolls in some cases are open to campaigns and organizations involved with elections purely for marketing purposes, GOTV, stuff like that.
Okay. So sorry, Rebecca, back to your original.
That's a good point. I feel this is one of those things where it's people don't register what's happening there. But it just it feels to me that the conspiracy theorist in me, but I don't think it's not big a conspiracy, is it feels like the federal government is using this opportunity to manipulate state elections. One, is that what you're seeing, Ben? And two, how do we tell people, how do we make sure that doesn't happen?
So not to get all, history textbook on you, but the people who wrote the Constitution did some of this work for us. So, the way that elections are run in the United States, it's up to states and local governments. The federal government doesn't run elections, even elections for the federal government, for Congress or for president. Congress can pass laws around elections, but that really just affects, either the day. That can affect the election day. We could move election day if we wanted. And states could have their own elections whenever they want. It doesn't have to be on the same day that we vote for a president or for Congress. So states and counties really run their, we talk about election day as if there's one elections. It's 50 different states that have their own systems of running elections. And then within that, we have 3,069 counties in the United States that are responsible for which polling places we vote at. They designed the ballots. The ballots look different from county to county. So we really have, more than 3,000 different election systems. So it's very hard to rig. It's not like somebody can just send out a virus. I mean, you would have to try to manipulate more than 3,000 different systems and data centers and ways to run elections. So I do want to give some people reassurance that it is very unlikely that, especially with this administration, what we've seen in terms of their capability to do this. But, it is concerning that the federal government would do something like this, and it's almost like a mafia tactic to try to coerce a state for voluntarily giving up voter rolls. And I will say, for people to look out for, there are, when it comes to statewide elections, right, for the Senate, the way that most states are set up, usually there's, the rural areas are redder and the urban areas are bluer. And there's really just a couple of counties in those sort of bluer areas, urban areas of the state. And so my personal worry is, what's going to happen in Maricopa County, in Phoenix, or these counties in the big blue cities. So you might start to see the administration come out and say that there's problems in those specific counties and specific states. But this is not something where the federal government just runs our elections. I've seen so much about this on social media, and I just want to walk people a little bit back from the brink and just say that it is not as easy as flipping a switch. This data is protected at the county and the state level. And so it is, I do think that the administration will try to mess with it. They might send ICE to polling places in these blue counties and, moderate states or states where there are close Senate elections or swing districts. We'll definitely see, pushes to verify everyone's citizenship and have federal agents at places and, intimidate. But in terms of just the federal government diving in and messing with elections, it just doesn't work like that. It's not that easy.
And can I just add to that last point that you said? And I've been saying to people behind the scenes that the fact that ICE has been operating the way that they are with, where were you born? Show me your papers type actions in January was really dumb on their part.
I agree.
Because it gave us a long runway to create not only the legal precedent, but to get established judge orders saying that they can't do those things. And so if they were wanting to use those type of tactics on election day, which I think we all agreed they would love to do. I mean, in the last election, Trump was telling people to go be poll watchers. If those are the tactics that they're wanting to use, they started way too early and gave us way too much time to make sure that they can't do that legally.
Which, by the way, is I think why he hasn't flipped the switch on the Insurrection Act. I think he's like, this, we got to keep the ace in the hole,
Yeah.
All right, Meredith, last question.
Well, I guess, this is just a thought. I talked to somebody yesterday who told me that they were like, ICE is ramping up in a big way behind the scenes where I live in Phoenix. And so now, my conspiracy theorist brain is like, all right, is there a primary coming up in Arizona? You just referenced Maricopa County, which I believe Phoenix is Maricopa County. So I'm like, all right, is that the next place? And how connected to it could the primaries be? In which case, are we also going to see a ramp up in Texas?
We might. I mean, there's Senate races in both, right? John Cornyn in Texas is running for re-election. Mark Kelly in Arizona, and so you have pretty. It's going to be a battle in the Senate for control. For a while, the general consensus was that Democrats had a much better chance at taking the House. Now, after everything we're seeing with ICE, I think leaders feel like the Senate is in play, but that includes winning Arizona. That includes, potentially needing to win Texas. And so, the primary in Texas, if anyone is watching this from Texas, your primary is in a couple weeks. You get to pick who is going to be running for the, who's going to be having the Democratic and Republican nominations. And you have some pretty interesting candidates. You have Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico on the Democratic side. And then on the Republican side, you have John Cornyn, who's the current senator, and he's running against Ken Paxton, who's the sitting attorney general, who is also under indictment for fraud. Yes. And is the head of law enforcement in the state of Texas, and he's been under indictment for over a week.
I could be under indictment for fraud, and I wouldn't even know. There's several envelopes I have.
Everybody's under indictment but it's like it depends where you're under indictment for fraud that they send ICE to do it. But by the way, exactly. Just said that they're in Austin. They're ramping up. They're seeing ICE ramp up there. So good call out, Meredith. Good call out.
Well, Ben, we are so grateful for the work that you do and for hanging out with us today. We hope you will come back because I think we've got you guys. This is only January 27th. Just go ahead and say that, okay? I know January has always felt like a long month. I will give it that. But this does feel like a particularly long January.
Grueling.
Indeed.
Grueling. Ben, where can people find you? Because you've been everywhere on my feed and really genuinely helpful at me being even just I'm somebody who calls my caucus people all the time, but even just seeing you there, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to do it today. So where can people find you so that more people get involved?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is just my name, Ben Sheehan. And then my Substack is Politics Made Easy. And every couple of days, I do sort of a breakdown of what happened and what you can actually do about it so that we're not being just inundated with rage bait, but we're being given a place to actually put our emotions into tangible action.
You're the best. Thank you so much for all your good work, Ben.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye. Well,
but you know what? Okay, this is what I will say is he did help, even just the numbers of the amount, because you know me, I'm very worried about the midterms, and I still am.
And I'm not. That's the difference. I'm not worried about it.
I know, but I thought it was great, just how many places they would have to mess with, and just how incompetent they are to do those things was reassuring to me. It's it's not just that it's a state and local level. It's these teeny tiny little counties. Wayne, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, and you mentioned the Insurrection Act at the end there. I think it's super important to recognize the Insurrection Act does not give the federal government the ability to cancel elections.
Period.
Right? It is not martial law. I know those two things get used interchangeably a lot. And so a lot of the conversations that I've been having on my platform around the National Guard deployment and things like that is we want to ensure that we're not getting into an active combat zone. Yeah. But if the Insurrection Act were to be employed at this point, there's a high likelihood it would get overturned very quickly by a judge because we have not reached the peak levels of necessity. And also, it would not suspend the Constitution or take away people's rights to vote, to be out, etc.
Yeah. I actually wanted to say this at the top, and I'll say it here, is something that I've been really appreciating about your content specifically, but I've seen you talk to other people in Minneapolis, specifically about whether or not Tim Walz should have sent out the National Guard. And the reason that I valued that so much, even just seeing the conversation, is I was this is the blueprint. In California, eventually, we'll be having to grapple with similar issues. And so even just seeing two competent people hash it out on the internet in Minneapolis, I was let me watch this without opinion exactly, because I don't live there, to be okay, what are the arguments? So, and you guys have just been the blueprint for even thinking through these issues. So
for sure. Yeah, and I think I always try to be very, very precise with my language. And so I would love for the National Guard to be in the streets in a protective manner to ensure that protesters are being protected. And that's the move that has been made right now, is that the National Guard has replaced ICE agents in these protective spaces where there are protests happening. But there have been a lot of people who are calling for an offensive. They're saying that the National Guard should go arrest ICE agents and get them off the streets. And I was that is war.
That's war. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And
exactly.
I don't
what you're
want
calling for is civil war. And
right.
That's a whole new can of worms. I don't know if we're ready for that.
Zone. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to live in where they're shooting at each other.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, even completely understanding where people are coming from in those spaces, and everybody just wants the thing to end. Right? Like, we don't want them to be there.
Yeah.
Having to figure out how, and I hate that it is happening in my state, but something I've been saying a lot is, like, I think they underestimated who we are.
Hell yeah.
And how collectivist Minnesotans are as a culture. I think in a rugged individual space, they might have been able to win, but we banded together, and our pushback is working. I mean, Dan Bovino, as you said at the top of the show, is banished back into.
You can feel them looking for an off-ramp here. You can feel like Trump was like, oh, I had now productive conversations with Tim Walz and Jacob Fry. Greg Bovino is out. Like, you can feel them, I think, especially with this Alex Preddy murder, because it became a guns rights issue about a white guy who worked with veterans. All of a sudden, they were like, ugh. Like, even with Renee Good, they could be like, well, she had the car and we don't love gay people. So, but like with this, it was like it hit all of their talking points. And so, they had to loop back.
Yeah, and I'm glad they can go ahead and leave.
Yeah, bye-bye. Wayne, we always end the show talking about what's having a moment for us. So I want Meredith to go first.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys what's having a moment for me. I took it back to 2012 recently. I was recently catfished. And I want to talk about it. I'm finally ready to say it. I was catfished by exactly who you guys would think I would fall privy to. Someone pretending to be Janet Yellen, former Secretary of the Treasury.
A classic catfish.
That's amazing.
I found this Threads account. It was like a new Threads account. And it was also, she used to be the chair of the Federal Reserve. And I should have had Vienna pull up a photo, but basically it was, I'll just read for you really quickly, like her thread that really got me. My husband and I have been together for 52 years, partners in life and in investing. We focus on long-term disciplined investing. Our investments are in technology and consumer sectors. I hope that you find my articles helpful and you follow and share. And I was like, this sounds great. Actually, I do need this. Like, I've been thinking about like what would happen if Max and Neve came and did a catfish episode on me. And it was like, well, she never like wants to talk on FaceTime because she's like super busy. And so, but I do think like in the Obama administration, I would have gotten catfished by Pedro Pascal. Now, given where we are, yeah, is it Janet Yellen 79? No, it's Janet Yellen 0813.
Wow, there's more than one Janet Yellen impersonator. I mean, like, things
That's
are
where our country has gotten. So anyway, you guys stay safe out there. Like, I think there's a lot of other places, but I just thought if I'm going to get investing advice, I think I should get it from
Janet
Yeah.
Federal Reserve. Rebecca, what's having a moment for you?
Okay. We were talking about the celebrities who are like out there and some of them, okay, this has been the most annoying for me. And this is like my own like woke nightmare, is the amount of people that are like, this is not the country that this is like further and worse and more draconian and dystopic than we ever imagined. And yet like, this is exactly the country that we live in. And there's something, I mean, like, I can't even imagine how infuriating it must be as a Black person to watch this and be like, yeah, we saw Philando Castile go through exactly this. And like, a handful of people said anything about it. And so that's one thing. But I wanted to highlight one celebrity that I thought was like really earnest and sweet. Meg Stelter, who's like always like a troll for the world. Like, she's such a joke. Like, everything she does is a joke. She came on social media and said, what you don't know about me is that I'm a Christian. I've never voted Republican, but I'm a devout Christian. And then I just want to play her statement about ICE because I felt like it was like so earnest in a world of people that I was like, what are you talking about? Deanna, do we have that clip?
If you are someone who identifies as a Christian but supports ICE or the president, I want you to remember that Jesus was executed for challenging the system. His life and teachings directly threatened the religious, economic, and political power structures of his time, and he was murdered. If you are a follower of Christ, I strongly urge you to follow what the Bible actually says. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. You can argue the context of any scripture, but you can't argue that God doesn't want us to love our neighbors, and our neighbors are being...
Yeah, I just thought that that was like a really earnest one. It felt like this was somebody who never... It's not that she's like apolitical or doesn't, but she's always like, she's never earnest. Like her whole thing is a joke. And this felt to me like so real and so earnest. And so that's what's having a moment for me.
Yeah.
Wayne, what's having a moment for you, bud?
I am trying to disconnect in as many ways as I can and like dive into TV specifically because I scroll way too much. And so between the two tasks I have is I always try to watch all of the Best Picture nominees.
Rebecca loves that.
I know. I'm the same.
And like I'm rooting for Sinners. I love that movie so much. I don't even like scary movies, but I saw it in theaters twice. But the other thing is I just started watching Pole to Pole, which is the Will Smith National Geographic. He starts at the South Pole and works his way up. And so I started watching it yesterday, and my son, a 13-year-old, he comes into the kitchen and he goes, "Dad, is that Will Smith?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Why do you sound like him?" And I was like, because he doesn't realize that I do a Will Smith impression with him constantly. And so it was the funniest thing for him to be listening and for him to like put two and two together finally, that half the time I'll be talking to him, I'll be like, "No, like when, you really like think about it, like there's no way, right, that you would do that, right?" He's never put that together until yesterday, and it was the funniest thing in the world to me. So
do you think it's because he's too young? Like we grew up on Will Smith and he like doesn't have the context for Will Smith?
Yeah. So for him, he's watched Bel Air. He has not watched The Fresh Prince of Bel Air.
Whoa.
Right. And so like his thinking, Will Smith is the guy who did the voiceover in Spies in Disguise. Like his whole worldview is different. Like, and I was like, okay, we need to watch Hitch at some point. Hitch is one of my favorite movies.
Yes.
But I'm like, we have to sit and watch these movies and make our way through, because I have failed you as a parent that you don't know Independence Day. Like, what have we done up until this point?
I actually, fun fact, I was on a 6th grade trip to Ellis Island, and they had to shut it down because they were filming that scene from Hitch in there.
Oh
and
my God, that's amazing.
Mendes walked right by me, and I was like, "That's a pretty lady." And then I saw the movie, and I was like, "Oh, I know who this is."
That's the greatest fun fact I've ever heard. When I tell you, I love that movie. So.
Yeah. Me too.
Do you guys remember the song from that movie?
From which one?
Was it the Switch?
Yeah.
I think that was it. Yeah.
Yes. You know what? Yeah. Switch. I still listen to that song. I feel like that was like when Will Smith was like kind of like, we'd had the like getting jiggy with it, and people were kind of like, okay, you got to switch it up a little bit. It can't just all be. But I thought Switch was a great fucking song.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I'm a big fan.
I feel like justice for Will Smith,
That's exactly.
That might be the hottest take of the whole show.
He apologized. He has disappeared from the public life. He's coming back, just talking about, hey, we got to find the secrets and answers to life. I'm not. What he did was wrong, and also,
I've always said
these are people who've done a lot worse, like the president of the United States. You know what I mean? Like we let the president foment an insurrection, get convicted of a felony, and then come back and be president. I think Will Smith,
Chris Rock just had to keep his wife's name out of his mouth. So that's simple.
On
that note, Wayne, where can our friends find you, or perhaps a pretty decent Will Smith impression?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Threads at Just Wayne Creative. Even though on Instagram it is justwayne.creative, because somebody has my handle, but that's fine. And yeah, I'm always on there talking about the intersection of pop culture and politics. And at times we'll do an impression of Will Smith or Obama. Sometimes that'll pop up. So, you know.
What if Will Smith stole your handle, Just Wayne Creative? Like,
That would be
actually,
funny.
that's the person who's using it on Instagram.
That would be really funny. Like, I do these things in my head where they are having conversations, like the impressions are having conversations, right? And so it's like, you know, that Will Smith is like, no, so I was really trying to figure out how to get over, being publicly canceled. And then Obama's like, well, to be clear, what has happened is not only a travesty, but an assault on the American public. And like Michelle said, when they go high, you couldn't slap. So it's like they do the thing in my head. And so
we love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Back. We got to do some more impressions.
Yeah, for sure.
We're grateful for you. We're sending you all the support and love, and we'll keep, amplifying what is happening in Minnesota. And y'all will be back. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll be back on Friday. I don't know. We're gonna drop a W in the chat if you plan on participating in the general strike. We'd love to know. We're figuring things out over here, what that looks like. But regardless, we'll be back next week. We will definitely be back next week, and in your phones and in your feed. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.